Hey there! Tonight, we're not diving into epic battles or royal decrees. We're stepping into two lives, lived at opposite ends of the same medieval world. On one side, a king, draped in velvet, surrounded by courtiers, deciding laws with a nod. On the other, a peasant, waking cold, working hungry, surviving one season at a time with nothing but grit and calloused hands. This is about the gap, not just of power, but of purpose. Two people born into systems they didn't choose, living days that couldn't be more different. One commands, one obeys, one builds empires, the other keeps them running. If this kind of calm, grounded history helps you unwind, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these stories travel before they fade into sleep. So take a breath, dim the lights, settle in, and let's begin with two lives that shaped a world, one silent chore at a time. You wake up slowly, not because you're rested, but because your back is screaming. It's a low, dull ache, like someone quietly grinding a stone into your spine. The straw-stuffed mattress under you is more mould than straw now. It hasn't been changed in years, and every time you shift your weight, dust and a faint smell of mildew puff into the air. You're sharing this bedding with your wife, two children, and something you're fairly sure is either a rat or a deeply unlucky squirrel. Either way, it's warm, and that's something. The roof is leaking again. You had hoped the clay patches you pressed into the holes last autumn would hold through winter, but they didn't. A slow drip has been plinking into a tin bowl all night. It sounds like a cruel clock. Plink, plink, plink. There's no fire. There was last night. You remember the glow before you fell asleep, huddled in your coarse wool blanket with your arms wrapped around your youngest child to keep her warm. But now there's nothing but cold ashes and the memory of warmth. Your breath fogs in the air above you. You don't have a chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets the smoke out and the rain in. It does both jobs poorly. Outside, something groans. Might be the wind, might be the pigs, might be your neighbour, Edric, already splitting wood. You can't tell, doesn't matter. You sit up slowly, careful not to knock over the bowl of water you keep beside the mattress. It's half frozen, with a skim of ice on the top. You break it with your fingers and splash it on your face. It stings. That's how you know you're awake. You pull on your tunic. The same one you wore yesterday, and every day before that. It's rough, smells faintly of smoke and earth, and has been mended so many times the patches have patches. You tie a rope around your waist. The belt broke last year. Your feet hit the dirt floor. No shoes. You had shoes once, but the soles wore out, and the leather cracked, and eventually you just gave up. Now it's bare feet in winter. It's not pleasant, but at least you don't have to worry about thieves stealing them. Your home is one room, no halls, no separate spaces. Just a hearth at the centre, a few tools hanging on the wall, and scraps of cloth nailed over the windows to block the wind. If you're lucky, there's a bench, a stool, maybe a single iron pot. Privacy? Luxury. The average medieval peasant lives cheek to jowl with their entire family, and sometimes their livestock. A goat might sleep near the door for warmth. Chickens peck inside, looking for spilled grain. Your wife is still asleep, or pretending. She was up with the baby again. The child has a fever that won't break. You've tried everything. Garlic, prayers, tying a scrap of holy cloth around her wrist. Nothing works. You don't mention it. Your oldest son is already outside. You can hear him coughing as he tends the fire pit. He's only 10, but he works like a grown man. Has to, there's no one else. You grab a crust of bread from the table, if you can call it that. It's a flat board resting on two uneven stumps. The bread is hard. You dip it in the leftover water to soften it. It doesn't help. You chew anyway. The bread is made from barley, or maybe rye, mixed with whatever filler you had. Peas, ground acorns, even sawdust. It's baked once a week maybe, and the rest of the time it sits near the fire, growing harder by the hour. You glance at the small wooden icon on the wall, a crude carving of a saint whose name you don't know. You mumble a prayer, or at least the rhythm of one. Latin isn't your language, but the words feel sacred by sound alone. Maybe that's enough. A few moments of silence pass. Then the rooster crows. Not yours, of course. You can't afford one. It's Edric's. It sounds smug. You stretch your back and hear it pop in 3 places. That's the morning song. You take a deep breath. The air smells like damp straw, ash, and unwashed wool. You feel the cold settle into your bones like an old friend. Time to start the day. Today, like every day, begins with wood. Without fire there's no warmth, no cooking, no hope of boiling the lice from your clothing. You grab a dull hatchet and trudge to the woodpile. You're not allowed to cut trees in the Lord's forest. Technically, even gathering fallen branches is illegal, but everyone does it. You just hope the steward isn't watching. The mud clings to your feet. The ground never really dries, not in winter. Paths are just grooves worn into the earth, churned to slurry by feet and hoofs and cart wheels. You slip once and curse, quietly. You don't want to wake the baby again. Later, you'll check the thatch. Try to mend the fence. Feed the pig. Tend the plot. Maybe go to the village oven, if there's anything to bake. But first, wood, always wood. You nod to your neighbour. He grunts in return. You both know this day already. You've lived it 100 times. The king wakes slowly, not from cold or pain or noise, but because that is the luxury of power. His bed is enormous, draped in velvet and lined with furs. The sheets are imported linen, so soft they barely whisper as he turns. The mattress is filled with goose down. Not just any geese, mind you. Ones raised specifically for a palace. Their feathers are collected by hand. He doesn't open his eyes at first. There's no need. The room is already warm thanks to the fire that's been maintained through the night by a servant whose only duty is to keep it fed. Logs from the royal forest. Birch, maybe? Or cedar? Something that smells faintly sweet as it burns. A gentle knock, then silence. Another knock. Then the door opens slowly. A valet enters. He walks quietly, placing a pitcher of warm water beside the bed. Another servant follows with a warmed robe. A third holds a towel. A fourth holds his slippers. Each one bows in sequence, like a slow-moving clock. This is routine. Every medieval court has one. The king does not rise alone. He is dressed, washed, tended to. Even the act of waking is political. Who is allowed into the room? Who speaks first? Who touches the king's garments? Protocol is everything. It reaffirms the natural order. The king stretches. A servant pulls back the curtains. Sunlight pours in, filtered through stained glass windows in blues and reds. It pools on the polished stone floor. The king yawns. He swings his legs over the bed. His feet never touch the ground. Slippers are slid on before he moves. The robe is draped over his shoulders. He doesn't lift a finger. He moves to the wash basin. The water is warm, perfumed with rose oil. A towel is held up for him as he pats his face dry. He examines himself in a polished silver mirror. Not bad, he thinks, perhaps a bit pale. He sits. A servant trims his beard. Another combs his hair. A third applies a balm to his hands. A fourth lays out his clothing. A doublet embroidered with gold thread. Hose dyed a deep green. A cloak lined with ermine. And these are not just clothes, they are symbols. His garments are dyed with expensive plant-based pigments. Woad, madder, saffron, each hue denoting wealth and power. Breakfast is being prepared. He can smell it. Fresh bread, honeyed figs, sausages, eggs. Something sweet. Something savoury. It will be laid out in the solar soon, beside a fire and beneath a tapestry of his grandfather slaying a boar. While he eats, he may hear poetry, or music, or scripture. He may receive guests, or he may not. The day's official matters can wait, unless war has broken out, or a bishop has arrived unannounced. He hears a knock at the outer door. A steward with the morning briefing. News from the border. A letter from the bishop. A request from a noble. A report on the grain stores. He waves it all away, later. He sits in the warmth and listens to a lute player softly plucking a tune. Outside, the bells ring the hour. The sound is pleasant, faint, untroubling. The world beyond the walls does not concern him. Not yet. The king takes a sip of wine. Breakfast can wait. For the medieval peasant, breakfast was not a meal. It was a concession. A small pause between waking and working. A momentary comfort carved from the relentless pace of survival. It rarely came with ceremony, and it never came with choice. The hearth is barely lit, its fire still sulking from the night before. You prod at the embers with a stick and blow gently, your breath fogging in the air. With luck and a bit of kindling that hasn't gone damp in the night, a flicker appears. You feed it carefully until it glows enough to warm the bottom of a clay pot balanced on the edge of a stone. Your hands hover near it, desperate to steal back the warmth the night took from you. There is no table, just a flat board across two stumps, already scorched in spots from balancing pots over open flame. You pull a wooden bowl from the shelf, not quite round, chipped at the lip, and ladle in a scoop of what might generously be called porridge. The recipe is simple: water, some ground barley or oats, a pinch of salt when you can afford it. There's no milk. Your cow, if you had one, died last winter, and the village dairy supplies go mostly to the reeve. The consistency of the porridge is closer to paste than soup. Lumpy, grey, with occasional husks of grain that crunch when they shouldn't. You tear off a hunk of dark, coarse bread, the kind made from a mix of barley, rye, and whatever else can be ground into flour. Wheat bread is for the nobility. White bread is a miracle you've never seen. This loaf is dense, heavy, and days old. You dip it into the hot mush, soften it enough to bite without breaking a tooth, and chew with the patience of someone who knows there's no alternative. Most peasants in medieval Europe began their day with something like this. The term breakfast wasn't even common until later centuries. Instead, the morning bite was a continuation of last night's sustenance. The word itself, breaking the fast, implied there had been a fast to begin with. For peasants, the fast never really ended. Your children sit near you, rubbing sleep from their eyes, already coughing. One of them eats with two hands, the other just stares into the bowl. You tell them to eat slowly. Not because there's more coming, there isn't, but because it's better to stretch the illusion. Your wife drinks weak ale from a cracked wooden cup. It's thin, bitter, and lukewarm, but it's safer than water. The stream outside has a habit of killing chickens and children alike. Boiling takes fuel you don't always have. So the ale, brewed from grain, fermented just enough to kill what the river carries, becomes the drink of choice, even at sunrise. Sometimes, when luck aligns, breakfast includes an onion, or leeks boiled with a bit of fat scraped from the bottom of the meat barrel. But this morning, there's no meat. The pig was slaughtered weeks ago, its parts salted and hung in the rafters. Most of it went to the Lord, as was required by law, a tax of flesh, bone, and survival. You hear your neighbour cough outside. Edric again. He's already on his feet, already working. You envy his energy. Or maybe you just envy his chickens. He has 3. You have none. Someone knocks on the door. A soft rap. It's a child, muddy-faced, barefoot, asking if your wife has any herbs for his sister. You don't? But she'd find something anyway. Dried nettles, maybe? Or horehound? You trade for it? Half a heel of bread, split in silence. The sun climbs slowly, lightening the frost on the sill. You stand, stretch your back, and wipe your hands on your tunic. The bowl goes back to the shelf. The pot, still steaming faintly, is saved for later. Maybe for dinner. Maybe not. That was breakfast. And now there is work. At the same hour, in a palace 50 miles and several universes away, breakfast is also being served. But here, it is not a necessity. It is a display. The king awakens in silk sheets, the smell of sweet wood smoke curling through the air from a fire that never dies. A steward appears to announce the meal, though the scents have already done the job. He is led into the solar, a private, sunlit room where tall windows spill light across painted walls and a floor covered in hand-woven rugs from Moorish lands. The table is already set. Silver platters lined with folded cloth napkins. Carved wooden bowls glazed with coloured enamel. Knives so polished they reflect the face of the man who holds them. No dish touches the table before being tasted by a food taster. The threat of poison is real, especially in times when political ambition is as common as hunger. A loaf of soft white bread, made from the finest sifted wheat flour, rests beneath a linen cover. This is manchet bread, prized for its purity. A luxury. Only the upper class can afford the fine sieves and careful processing that turns ordinary grain into something this pale and delicate. Alongside it, poached eggs from palace hens, sprinkled with herbs from the castle's kitchen garden. Spiced sausages of venison and boar, cured and smoked in ways peasants have only heard about. A bowl of figs, imported at cost from Iberia or the Holy Land, cut open to reveal their purple-red insides. Honeycomb dripping onto cheese, rich and soft, made from the milk of sheep raised on lands the king has never seen. He eats slowly. Not because he is savouring the meal, but because he knows he can. There's no rush. A cup of mead sits by his plate, gold-tinged and lightly scented with herbs. He drinks little of it. A servant waits with watered wine in case his mood changes. Breakfast for a king is as much about being seen as it is about eating. Attendants hover in silence. Musicians pluck a slow tune in the corner. The steward reads aloud the day's agenda. Petitions from nobles, disputes over borders, supply concerns from the coast. The king listens with one ear, chewing on a slice of pear poached in cinnamon. It is sweet. It is forgettable. Medieval royal meals were orchestrated events. Banquets and feasts were public, but even private meals followed rituals. Certain dishes implied wealth and status. The more exotic the ingredient, the higher the status. Spices like cinnamon, cloves and nutmeg were imported at staggering prices through Venetian and Arab merchants. A single sack of pepper might be worth a cow. He finishes half the bread, a sliver of ham, and picks at a pastry filled with minced apples and dried cherries. When he's had enough, he signals with a hand. The plates are cleared silently. A towel is brought for his fingers. He hasn't touched anything directly, but the gesture is expected. He reclines slightly, watching the dust float through the sunbeams. The servants step backward in perfect rhythm. The king's dog, a thin greyhound with polished fur, pads to his feet and rests its head on his slipper. He absently strokes its ears. Breakfast is over. Not because he is full, but because he says so. One meal eaten for fuel. One for pleasure. One devoured to fight hunger. One consumed because it exists. The peasant scrapes the last grain from his bowl and drinks weak ale. The king throws away half a roasted partridge because it tasted slightly overdone. The average peasant consumed around 1,500 to 2,000 calories a day when available, mostly from bread and pottage. The average nobleman? Closer to 4,000, with far less physical labour to burn it. Gout, the disease of kings, wasn't metaphorical. Too much meat, too much wine, too little motion. But in the end, neither man truly wins. The peasant walks away hungry, to a day that will demand everything. The king walks away bored, to a day that will offer everything, and ask him to pretend it matters. And so they rise from their tables, both under the same rising sun, one stomach aching with emptiness, the other aching with fullness, neither truly satisfied. You reach for your tunic, not because it's clean, not because it's new, but because it's all you have. In medieval Europe, peasants didn't own wardrobes. They owned a garment, singular. Maybe two, if the harvest had been particularly kind. One for work, one for sleeping. Sometimes they were the same thing. Yours certainly are. It's made of rough spun wool, the fibres coarse enough to scratch your skin raw if you're not careful. The colour? Something between mud and old straw. It was once a pale brown, but years of labour, smoke, and unwashed sweat have darkened it into anonymity. The sleeves are uneven. One is frayed at the cuff, the other patched with an old scrap from your wife's dress. No one will notice. No one cares. Underneath, if it's a good day, you might wear a linen shirt. Smock is the proper term. But today is not a good day. It tore last week while you were hauling timber, and the tear opened like a mouth across your side. You haven't had time to mend it. Besides, linen doesn't keep out the cold like wool does, even if it's softer on the skin. You step into your hose. Not like the nobles' finely woven stockings. Yours are closer to long woolen tubes tied at the knee, sagging at the ankle, and held up by sheer stubbornness. One of them has a hole in the heel. You've been meaning to stitch it shut, but every day it seems less important than getting through the next. Shoes? If you're lucky. Maybe you own a pair. Old, cracked leather with twined laces and soles that have more holes than hide. Most peasants went barefoot for half the year, especially during warmer seasons. In winter, scraps of cloth might be wrapped around the feet, or you simply walked carefully. Today, you slip your feet into wooden clogs, crudely shaped and unforgiving, but better than frostbite. Your belt is rope. It used to be leather, but that cracked and snapped the same year your youngest was born. The rope is a better symbol of your station anyway. A looped, scratchy truth wrapped round your waist. No buttons, no zippers. Those are luxuries centuries away. Your clothes are fastened with knots, wooden toggles, or nothing at all. The neckline of your tunic hangs open, loose from years of wear. Your wife ties it closed with a bit of twine. She doesn't smile. Neither do you. There's nothing joyful about getting dressed when every stitch reminds you how close you are to nakedness. Medieval peasants had no closets, no drawers. Clothing hung from nails in the wall, or was folded and placed in a chest, if you were fortunate enough to own one. Lice were common companions. Fleas, too. You brush something off your sleeve, and decide not to look too closely. In some parts of Europe, sumptuary laws restricted what peasants could wear. Not that you were likely to offend those laws. You couldn't afford fine colours or dyed fabrics, even if you tried. Purple, scarlet, or gold. That would be illegal. And laughable. You've never even seen gold thread. Your wife wears much the same. A kirtle, a kind of dress if you squint, made of scratchy wool, tied at the waist with a cord. Her head is covered with a wimple, not for fashion, but for warmth and modesty. Her sleeves are rolled up. She's already working. The children wear hand-me-downs so patched and mismatched they resemble scarecrows. The baby is swaddled in rags. There's a hole in one of them, which you patch with more rag. The cycle continues. Getting dressed is not a transformation. It is not preparation. It is simply a layering of misery onto flesh. A small armour against the world, just thick enough to fool yourself into thinking it matters. But you wear it anyway, because to go out in nothing would be worse. In the castle, The king's garments await him long before he opens his eyes. Laid out by pages and valets, his clothing is carefully selected, inspected, and warmed by the fire so that not even a thread feels chilled when it touches his skin. It begins not with the outer garments, but with the linens. Soft, bleached white underclothes made of finely woven flax fibres. Only nobles could afford such softness. The peasants grow the flax, the king wears it. First, a shirt, long-sleeved, smooth, almost weightless. It smells faintly of lavender, dried and stored among the folds by servants whose names he doesn't know. Over that hose, snug-fitting woolen garments that cover his legs from ankle to thigh. These are dyed a deep blue, a colour expensive to produce, extracted from woad and reserved for those of means. Over the hose, he is helped into a doublet, a padded tailored jacket that buttons down the front with small discs of bone or polished horn. The buttons are decorative as much as functional. Unlike the peasant, the king wears buttons not because he must, but because he can. Buttons are a mark of craftsmanship, proof of tailoring, a symbol of class stitched into the seams. His cloak today is velvet, dyed of rich burgundy, lined with ermine fur. The cloak drapes from his shoulders and trails slightly on the floor. A servant tucks it just so, to avoid dust. On his feet, soft leather boots, made by the castle cordwainer, fitted exactly to his size and shape. They have never touched mud. A sash of silk is tied around his waist, its ends embroidered with the symbol of his house. Silk is imported from Byzantium and the East. It travels through trade routes guarded by mercenaries and balanced on the backs of camels. It arrives here at great cost. He doesn't think about that. He just likes the way it drapes. Jewellery is optional but customary. A ring or two, a brooch, a clasp set with semi-precious stones. These are not for security or beauty. They are reminders to everyone in his presence that his body is sacred, adorned, elevated. While he dresses, attendants discuss the weather, his agenda, who might be arriving for court. Someone mentions a visiting dignitary. Another whispers about grain prices. It's all background noise. He nods, occasionally raises an eyebrow but doesn't respond. He is busy being dressed. The final item, a circlet, not quite a crown, but enough to remind everyone who he is. Not too heavy. This is morning wear, not a state occasion. Getting dressed for the king is not merely about function or even comfort. It is a performance, a layering of power, thread by thread. His clothes are stitched not just to warm him, but to separate him from the world, to make it clear that he is not of the same cloth. And when he steps into the hall, robes trailing, hands ringed, boots spotless, everyone who sees him understands the truth. This is not a man, this is a symbol. And symbols are always well dressed. One man dresses in a single wool tunic, patched beyond recognition. The other is wrapped in layers of tailored elegance. The peasant gets dressed while standing, shivering beside a smoky hearth. The king is dressed by others, warmed by the fire he never has to feed. But both, beneath it all, are still just men. One clothed in discomfort, the other in performance. One wrapped in survival, the other wrapped in image. Both bound by thread, though only one can afford to ignore the seams. You step outside, and the cold hits like a slap. The door swings on tired hinges, and the air is sharp enough to sting the inside of your nose. You squint into the early light. The sun isn't up yet, not really. Just a pale smear on the horizon. Your breath clouds in front of you like smoke. You don't need a clock to know the time. Your bones do that for you. The yard is a mess of frozen ruts and old straw. Chickens peck lazily near the woodpile. One of them is limping. You make a mental note to check its leg later. You won't. There's no time. Your day begins not with a plan, but a list of obligations stacked like firewood. Uneven, unstable, always about to topple. First, you check the animals. The pig is rooting through what remains of the compost pile. Its eyes follow you warily, like it knows it's next on the menu if winter doesn't ease up. It's probably right. You refill its trough with scraps, turnip skins, old leaves, and a few spoonfuls of yesterday's porridge crusted onto the side of the pot. The pig eats with more energy than you'll have all day. The firewood pile is low again. You grab the axe from its spot against the wall, the handle smooth from use, the blade nicked and dulled. You trudge toward the tree line, feet sinking slightly into frozen mud. You've been harvesting from the same grove all winter. Each day you go a little farther in. Each swing of the axe feels heavier than the last. You gather what you can carry: broken branches, bark, even damp twigs. Everything burns if you're desperate enough. You haul it back in bundles on your back. No sled, no cart, no mule. Just you. You stack it haphazardly near the door. It won't last a week. Then water. Always water. You walk to the stream with a bucket in each hand. The water is clearer than it should be. A bad sign. That means fewer fish, fewer frogs. You draw it up in silence. You slip once on the icy stones, and your knee slams into the mud. You swear under your breath. The water sloshes. One bucket spills. You don't refill it. You just go home. Back at the hut, your wife is spinning wool by the hearth. The children are up now, huddled near the fire, watching her fingers work the spindle with slow, practiced movements. The baby cries. She doesn't stop spinning. You change into your working tunic, the one with fewer holes near the knees, and wrap a cloth around your head. There's work waiting in the Lord's field. There's always work, and always for someone else's benefit. You walk the mile to the manorial land, shoulders hunched, hands in sleeves. Others walk beside you. Men you know, men you don't talk to. Conversation is a luxury for men with energy. You save your breath for labour. Today's duty is muck spreading. The stench is overwhelming. You breathe through your mouth and try not to gag. You shovel slowly, methodically, spreading dung across frozen soil in the name of future fertility. You don't ask how much you'll be paid. You won't be. This is part of your feudal obligation. Corvée labour. You owe the Lord so many days a year, and today is one of them. You'll get a nod, maybe some leftover grain if he's feeling generous. You won't complain. You've seen what happens to men who do. In the medieval manorial system, peasants were expected to work their lord's land in addition to tending their own. The balance was impossible. Your own plot withers while you sow his wealth. But to protest is to starve. By midday your hands are raw. Your legs tremble. You've relieved yourself behind a tree and wiped with leaves. Your stomach groans. Lunch is whatever you brought. A crust of bread, a clove of garlic, a slice of dried turnip wrapped in cloth. You chew slowly, seated on a rock, watching the Lord's reeve ride by on horseback. His boots shine. Your knees are stained with filth. You finish eating. There is more work. There is always more. The king's duties begin in the great hall, long after the servants have finished setting it in order. Tall windows spill coloured light across polished floors, and the air is fragrant with herbs scattered to mask the smell of too many bodies in too little space. A scribe stands ready with a scroll. The steward approaches, bowing low. The first item on the agenda is a petition from a noble family requesting permission to build a new mill. The king listens, then gestures. Let the advisors argue. He'll decide once they've worn themselves out. He settles into the high-backed chair, not quite a throne, but elevated nonetheless, and sips wine from a goblet carved with a royal crest. His robe is thick velvet, his fingers heavy with rings. A clerk begins reading aloud the list of grievances from the local burghers. The taxes are too high, the roads are impassable. Bandits stalk the woods again. The king nods occasionally. Mostly he thinks about lunch. A messenger arrives from the northern border. There's trouble, as always. The Baron is late with his levies. The peasants there have been refusing to work. He asks if soldiers should be dispatched. The king raises an eyebrow. Only if the harvest is in, he murmurs. The medieval king was not always a tyrant. His days were often consumed with small, grinding details, managing trade routes, hearing disputes, confirming marriages, ensuring vassals remained loyal. His power was vast, but not absolute. Even a king needed to manoeuvre. Through politics, through custom, through the church. A priest approaches with a sealed letter from the bishop. More concerns about heresy in the southern shires. A wandering preacher has been stirring up unrest. The king sighs. He'll let the Inquisition deal with that. The court jester interrupts with a joke. No one laughs until the king smirks. Then the room erupts with polite chuckles. He listens to a minstrel perform a new ballad, half paying attention while his steward quietly counts out expenses from the last feast. The numbers are high, no one questions it. Then come the petitions from the commoners. A farmer with a broken fence and a neighbour with aggressive geese. A baker arguing with a brewer about grain prices. The king listens for a moment, then waves them away. Let the reeve sort it. A hunting party is scheduled for the afternoon. He looks forward to that. A break from the talking. But for now, he returns to his chamber to review letters. His own seal, his own wax, his own ink made from oak galls and iron salts. He doesn't write them, of course. He dictates. The scribe's job is to translate the king's words into something dignified. One letter to a cousin in France, another to the Pope, a third to a mistress in a border town. By late morning, he's spoken to 30 men, heard 20 grievances, signed 15 scrolls, and decided very little. But his presence is enough. He is king, and kings above all must be seen. One man begins his day by shoveling manure, the other by shuffling papers. One earns nothing and owes everything. The other owns everything and earns nothing. Yet both play their roles in a kingdom that demands performance. The peasant labours under the weight of his body. The king labours under the weight of his title. One cannot rest, the other cannot hide. The peasant's duties draw blood. The king's draw ink. You wake up already unclean. There's no moment of freshness, no scent of soap, no warm water on the face. Dirt lives with you. Not just under your nails or on your skin, but in your mattress, in your clothes, in your food, and sometimes in your blood. You don't notice it anymore. Or rather, you notice it constantly, and there's just nothing to do about it. There's a bucket in the corner of your hut. It's filled with grey water, the same used yesterday to rinse a bowl or wash your child's feet. You splash your hands into it, then rub your face. It's shockingly cold. You blink. Your skin tightens. You feel more awake, but not cleaner. Soap is rare. When it exists, it's made from lye and animal fat, coarse and stinging, and kept for special occasions. Your wife used the last of it weeks ago to wash linens before a saint's feast. She still has the blisters. You wipe your hands on your tunic, which is already soiled at the waist from firewood, ash, and pig feed. It doesn't matter. You smell like sweat and smoke and old wool. So does everyone else. Medieval peasants didn't bathe often. Not because they didn't want to, but because there was little opportunity. No plumbing. No privacy. Water had to be carried, bucket by bucket, from streams or wells. Heating it meant burning precious firewood. The result? A full bath happened maybe a few times a year. More often in summer, less in winter. You couldn't waste warmth. The church preached cleanliness of the soul, not the body. Some monks bathed, but for the average labourer, a wash meant a quick splash of cold water on the face and hands. You've heard rumours of Roman baths, ancient places of steam and marble, but they sound more like fairy tales than history. You pick at the dirt in your fingernails. It's a pointless ritual. You'll be knee-deep in soil within the hour anyway. Your feet are cracked, your knuckles chapped. You have a rash on your leg that hasn't gone away. You think it might be ringworm, or just irritation from your hose rubbing the same spot every day. Your wife combs the children's hair with her fingers. You see a louse? She crushes it with a thumbnail and keeps going. The toilet is a pit behind the hut, half covered with old wood planks. In winter, it's frozen and dangerous. You squat beside it instead. Everyone does, no one speaks of it. Public latrines exist in larger towns, but they reek and overflow. Chamber pots are dumped into the street. You've seen someone throw waste from a window and yell, "Garde-lou!" a crude French warning to clear the path. You didn't move fast enough. Tooth care? You chew on a mint sprig if you can find one. Some folks use cloth to scrub with ashes. Most just lose their teeth before 40. You run your tongue along your molars and feel one wiggle. You spit and there's blood. Again. The village healer. Not a doctor, just an old woman with herbs. Told you to drink nettle tea. It didn't help. She also said to sleep with a toad under your pillow. You didn't try that one. Disease is constant. Boils, fevers, coughs that never quite go away. One of the neighbour's sons died last week. Fever and vomiting, they said. Might have been bad meat. Order water. Or God's will. You check the baby's forehead. Still warm. Not burning. But not right. Your wife hasn't said anything, but you see the fear in her eyes. You know people who carry dried herbs in pouches around their necks to keep away miasmas, bad air. The priest says illness is a punishment. The healer says it's the weather. You say nothing. What's the point? Your neighbour claims he went 6 years without getting sick. Then his foot turned black. He died 3 days later. You dunk your head in the water trough to rinse your hair. It doesn't help. You smell like a man who works for a living. You always will. And still, you go on. Because there's no alternative. The king wakes not to filth, but to fragrance. His chambers are swept twice daily by servants using bundles of herbs, thyme, rosemary, lavender, scattered across the stone floors. They don't just freshen the air. They're believed to ward off illness. Clean smells, they say, make for a clean body. He sits beside a basin of warm water. A servant dips a cloth, wrings it carefully, and wipes the king's face and neck. Another dabs at his hands. The water is infused with rose petals, orange blossoms, sometimes vinegar. It smells like luxury. Unlike peasants, the king does not carry his own water, nor does he walk to the bathhouse. The bath comes to him, in the form of a large wooden tub lined with linen sheets, filled with heated water poured from brass pitchers. He bathes when he wishes, sometimes once a week, sometimes daily. It's his choice. Soap is not just available, it's imported. Bars come from Castile, made with olive oil and lye, scented with citrus or pine. It lavers softly, it does not sting. The king's skin is pampered with oils afterward to prevent dryness. Almond oil, if it's in stock. Goose fat, if not. He is rubbed with cloths made of fine linen. His hair is brushed with a boar bristle brush. His nails trimmed with care, checked for signs of illness. Cleanliness, for royalty, is not merely comfort. It's an extension of health, of status, of godliness. His physicians, university trained, perhaps in Paris or Salerno, believe the body has 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Balance is key. They advise the king to avoid dampness, excess wind, spoiled food. He is bled periodically to restore equilibrium. He follows a regimen known as regimen sanitatis, rules for healthy living. Moderate food, rest, gentle movement, fresh air, no overexertion. The body, they say, must be tended like a garden. His teeth are cleaned with a cloth dipped in wine or vinegar. sometimes ashes or crushed herbs. He rinses with sage-infused water. Bad breath, the doctor says, can signal internal decay. He listens, even if he finds it tedious. Illness is still a threat, of course. Even kings get fevers. Even kings die of the plague. But when he falls ill, he is surrounded by care, poultices, prayers, leeches, tinctures brewed in silver pots. When he coughs, 5 men listen. During outbreaks, the king retreats, to the countryside, to the coast, anywhere but the city. He closes the gates, no visitors. The poor die in the streets. He reads about it in letters. He hears tales of entire towns falling ill, entire villages vanishing. He commissions a prayer, a mass, a candle to be lit. And he dines as usual. Cleanliness to him is visible. It is scented. It is symbolic. And above all, it is managed by others. The peasant scrapes the mud from his heels with a stick. The king scrapes the dirt from his nails with ivory. The peasant smells of animals, ash, and labour. The king smells of citrus and rose water. One body is raw from cold water and coarse wool. The other is cradled by steam and silk. But both, in the end, bleed. Both, when cut, scar. Both, when struck by plague, fall the same way. And death, whether in a straw bed or a gilded chamber, does not care for soap. Leisure, for you, is a strange word. It sounds like something for other people. Softer lives, softer hands. You don't have leisure. You have pauses. Gaps in labour where your body aches too much to move. And your thoughts shuffle through boredom and pain. Still, even the lowest peasant finds a way to break the monotony. Because if all you ever do is work, eventually, you forget why you bother to survive at all. The first and most common form of entertainment. Talking. Not idle gossip, although that exists, but stories. Tales told by the firelight when the work is done, when the children have quieted, and the pot is empty. You don't own a book. You can't read, and neither can anyone else you know. But you've heard stories passed down from your grandfather about saints, demons, dragons, and long-dead kings. Some tales are morality fables. Others are barely held together nonsense about animals who outwit the devil. All are told slowly, dramatically, with long pauses and widened eyes. They don't have to make sense. They just have to make you forget your hunger. The village also entertains itself with song. Not in melodies you'd find in a cathedral, but sharp, rhythmic chants. Simple lyrics, easy to remember. Often lewd, always local. You know a dozen that mention someone in your hamlet by name. You sing while you work sometimes. Not because it's fun, but because it helps the time pass. Festivals, when they happen, are the height of joy. The church calendar provides structure. Feast days, saints' days, holy days. These are your sanctioned excuses to stop labouring, to drink, to dance, to gather in the square with others and pretend the year isn't dragging its weight across your back. During the feast of St. Martin, the villagers roast what meat they can spare. You once saw a pig's head carried on a platter, its eyes replaced with onions. Children danced around it. Someone juggled turnips. You drank too much ale and vomited behind the church. It was the best night of your year. Games exist too. No boards, no tokens. Just rocks, sticks, and imagination. You've played Catch the Goose, a game that mostly involves chasing a terrified bird across a field while people laugh. You've bet on who can lift the biggest log. You've watched grown men wrestle in the mud for nothing but pride and scratches. Sometimes a travelling performer passes through. A juggler, a puppet show, a man with a monkey who does tricks for coin. You watched one swallow fire once. You're still not sure how he survived. You didn't have a penny to give him, but you stood in the mud for an hour and watched in silence. And then, of course, there's ale. Weak, cloudy, sour. Brewed in barrels that have never been cleaned. Served in mugs that have never been washed. But it works. It dulls the edge. On a good night, you sit with neighbours, nursing the drink, and listening to someone attempt a dirty joke that's too long and poorly told. You laugh anyway. Not at the joke, at the effort. Drunkenness isn't frowned upon exactly. It's expected. Your lord drinks too. The priest may warn against excess, but even he accepts a cup during feast days. You've danced in the dirt, barefoot, with someone else's wife. You've sung songs you don't remember. You've fallen asleep under a tree and woken up with leaves in your mouth. It isn't much. It's barely anything. But for a few hours it's enough. For the king, entertainment is an institution, an extension of power, taste and spectacle. It isn't simply about enjoyment. It's about control, presentation, dominance of boredom itself. Each day the king has choices. Music, sport, hunting, dining or the theatre of politics. Each a stage upon which he performs his identity as ruler. In the late morning, a minstrel plays in the solar. Lute, harp, flute. Trained hands plucking chords composed to soothe or flatter. The melodies are composed by professionals, copied by scribes, and performed by those who know their lives depend on the king's reaction. He listens idly. Sometimes he closes his eyes. Not out of appreciation, but out of boredom. Then he waves a hand and says, "Enough." The room empties. Later he walks in the gardens. These aren't wild hedgerows like those outside the peasant's hut. They are curated spaces. Ornamental herbs, sculpted topiaries, fountains imported from Italy. Everything arranged to remind him of order, his order. He plays chess with a visiting noble. The board is made of inlaid ivory and lapis. The pieces are hand-carved. The game is long, slow, half conversation, half test. He wins, because he must. The noble doesn't mind. He was never trying to win anyway. In the afternoon he hunts. The royal hunt is not a necessity. It's not about feeding the court, it's theatre. He mounts his horse, bred for stamina and speed, wearing a leather doublet, gloves stitched with his crest. Hawks ride on gloved fists. Hounds run ahead. Horns sound. The forest clears for him. The animals are driven toward him by beaters. Peasants with sticks, shouting and stomping through the brush. When the deer appears, he looses his arrow. If he hits, it is a great shot. If he misses, it was a great shot that narrowly missed. The record will reflect it either way. At the end of the hunt, there is a feast. The boar is roasted whole. Game birds are dressed in their own feathers. Wine flows freely. This is not survival, this is abundance. A display of divine favour. The medieval king's court often included jesters, acrobats, storytellers, and even magicians. These performers were well trained, many travelling across kingdoms. A single misstep, a poorly told joke, an insult taken too far, could mean exile or worse. But if they succeeded, they might dine near nobility, gain patronage, or receive a gift of land. He watches a performance. A troupe enacts a play from a distant city, perhaps Paris or Prague. The themes are familiar: betrayal, honour, God. He applauds at the end, even if he barely followed the plot. The hall echoes with approval. No one asks if he enjoyed it. In the evening he may read. Not aloud, that is for clerks. But he listens to books being read to him. Tales of ancient Rome, romances of knights and maidens, treatises on theology. He asks questions occasionally, not always expecting answers. Then music again. Then a warm bath. Then sleep. Entertainment is not rare for him. It is constant. And yet, he is often bored. The peasant laughs because it might be the only joy he feels all week. The king laughs because it's expected. One dances in the dirt, in bare feet, to the rhythm of a friend slapping a barrel. The other dances in a hall, gilded and perfumed, to strings and harps. One sings to forget the hunger. The other listens to singers to fill the silence. The peasant waits all year for a single feast day. The king feasts every day, and longs for something new, yet both, in their own way, seek the same thing: to forget for a moment what they are. You wake hungry again. You went to bed with hunger sitting in your gut like a stone, and it's still there, just dulled by sleep. The idea of being full feels like a memory from another life. Maybe you were full once, a festival day, a neighbour's wedding, but most mornings, like this one, your stomach starts out quiet and gets louder by the hour. You stir the pot hanging over the hearth. It's yesterday's pottage, still warm from the coals, thick like glue and brown like mud, bits of barley, a turnip chunk, a wilted leaf. You ladle a scoop into your bowl. There's not much left, so you give the bigger share to your eldest child. He doesn't thank you. He just eats like a dog that doesn't want to be seen. Pottage is what you eat. Morning, evening, sometimes cold in the middle of the day, if there's enough to spare. There's no recipe. It's whatever you have, boiled for hours until it can't be picked apart. Barley and oats are common. Sometimes beans, peas, leeks. If you're lucky, a scrap of fatback or a bone for flavour. Usually not. Bread is next if there's any. Yours is black and hard, made from rye and barley. Grains that grow better in poor soil, the kind you farm. The flour is mixed with water and salt if you have it, then baked into rounds or flat cakes in the communal oven if you remembered your place in line. There's grit in the bread. Stone ground flour always leaves a bit behind, and it wears your teeth down year by year. Your molars feel dull now. One is starting to crack. You chew anyway. Slowly. Carefully. You drink ale. Everyone does. Not the strong stuff. What you have is weak and cloudy, more like fermented grain tea than anything intoxicating. But it's safe. Safer than the river. The well went bad last month, and you still remember the sick child who didn't make it. Boiling water takes firewood, and firewood takes hours. Ale it is. Meat is rare. Maybe once a month you buy a scrap from the tanner. A cut too fatty to cure, or too bruised to store. You boil it with roots and pretend it's a feast. Sometimes your neighbour traps a rabbit. You pretend not to notice. Hunting's forbidden unless you're a noble. The punishment for poaching a deer is death. For a rabbit, a beating. For a swan, you don't want to know. Your pigs are gone. Sold off after the last frost destroyed the root cellar. Chickens are easier to keep, but they don't lay in winter. You used to trade eggs for cheese. Now you just eat the eggs, when there are any. Cheese is a summer luxury. Milk turns too quickly this time of year. On holy days, there's more to eat. Saints' feasts, harvest festivals, weddings. These are the times you remember with your eyes closed. Bread stuffed with onions. Roasted goose. Baked apples dripping with honey. It doesn't last, but it burns into memory. You've told your children stories of the last Michaelmas feast as if it were legend. Some peasants barter with their produce. You trade leeks for butter, cabbages for fish. The fish is salted, rough on the tongue, but keeps well. You once found a coin at the roadside and bought a fig at market. One figure. You sliced it in 4 and let your children each have a piece. They still talk about it. Your food doesn't travel. Nothing comes from farther than a day's walk. You don't know what olives are. You've never seen a lemon. Spices are a rumour. Pepper? For princes. You flavour with herbs you grow yourself. Thyme, mustard leaf, horseradish root. You salt when you can. More often you don't. Your wife cooks. She stirs, strains, kneads, and lifts pots that steam her face red. Her hands are always red and cracked. Your eldest daughter helps, scraping pots and tending the fire. Meals are more work than reward. You eat in silence, or with quiet murmurs. No time for talk. You eat to finish. And when it's done, you thank God, whether you mean it or not. Then you go back to work. The king eats whenever he chooses, or rather, whenever the schedule of the court allows him to be fed with ceremony. Meals are more than nourishment here. They are theatre, statements. A feast not just for his guests, but for the idea of monarchy itself. His food is prepared in vast kitchens beneath the castle. Whole departments exist to coordinate the supply of game, fish, vegetables, spices, bread, and wine. There are master cooks, assistants, pastry makers, poulterers, fishmongers, sauce chefs, spit turners, butterers, cupbearers, and food tasters. Each has a rank. Some have apprentices. Many serve for life. Bread arrives first, white and soft, made of wheat grown on royal estates and sifted through fine cloth. This is manchet bread, made only for the rich. It's served warm, sliced thin by a specialist. He carries the knife like a knight might carry a sword. Next come meats. Spit roasted boars, larded hares, herbed venison, wild birds cooked in wine and cloves. There are pies with layered fillings, pigeon, pear, dates, and veal, each crust sealed and stamped with the royal crest. Everything smells of spice: nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon, saffron. Spice is more expensive than gold. The king does not eat from wooden bowls. His dishes are pewter, silver, or gilded ceramic. His goblets are etched glass or ornate metal, often studded with stones. He drinks wine from Aquitaine, Cyprus, Burgundy, imported by merchants who bribe their way into court favour. There is fish, always fish, even on meat days. Salted sturgeon, eels in almond milk, baked trout garnished with violets. On Fridays and fast days, when meat is forbidden by church law, the cooks become even more inventive. Whale meat is considered fish, by decree. So is beaver tail. So are frogs. A theologian once argued that barnacle geese, born of driftwood, were also fish. Feasts are long, 3, sometimes 4 hours. Each course ends with an entremet, a kind of edible entertainment, a model castle made of pastry, a roasted peacock redressed in its feathers, set ablaze with brandy, a pie that, when opened, releases live birds into the hall. The king eats little of each dish. A few bites, a taste. He's not eating for hunger. He's eating for demonstration. His physicians monitor his consumption carefully. He is advised according to the theory of the 4 humours: balance between hot, cold, wet, and dry. Roast beef is hot and dry. Fresh apples are cold and moist. Food must be chosen with care, lest it unbalance the king's body, or worse, his mind. Sometimes he is bled before a meal. Sometimes he fasts. Sometimes he indulges. But always the meal is recorded, chronicled, observed. If guests are present, and they often are, they watch the king eat first. They do not begin until he does. They are served less lavish versions of his dishes. They watch his face for signs. Did he like the quail? Was the sauce too sharp? Should they compliment the chef? After the meal, his hands are washed in rosewater by attendants. A perfumed cloth is offered. A minstrel plays. A servant recites a list of expenses incurred. And then with a nod, he stands. The meal is over. The performance is complete. The peasant eats scraps and roots and salt. The king eats peacocks and pears in wine. The peasant prays for enough. The king prays it's not overdone. The peasant eats what he can find. The king chooses what others search for. But both, under wool or velvet, in draughty huts or gilded halls, must eat. Both rely on others. One on the land, the other on men. Neither can live without the hands that grow, gather, kill, and cook. The difference is who gets to rest afterward. You wake with the name of a saint on your lips. You're not sure which one. There are too many. Saint Cuthbert? Saint Isidore? The one your wife prays to for healthy births? Or the one your neighbour swears healed his cow's leg? They blur together. Their images are painted badly on wood, or carved in the stone at the chapel. Flat eyes and bent fingers, holding books, staffs, or babies. They all look tired. You feel the same. Religion is not something you think about. It's something you live inside, like the weather, like the mud. You cross yourself before you eat. You mumble prayers before bed. You know the Lord's Prayer, though half the words don't mean anything to you. You know the Creed. You know that Sunday is for church, and that missing it gets you noticed. You know the priest smells like wine and speaks in Latin. Latin, a language you do not understand. The priest reads from his book with a voice like a chant, rising and falling like the wind in the eaves. You nod, you kneel, you stand, you sit, you say amen. It's all by rhythm, like a dance you never learned, but have done all your life. The church is cold, always. Stone walls, no fire. Just candles, a rough altar, and the echo of old prayers. You sit on a bench and think about your chores. You don't mean to, you just do. The church tells you what to eat and when to fast. It tells you when to mourn and when to celebrate. There are dozens of feast days, but most of them mean kneeling more, not eating more. On Fridays, you don't eat meat. During Lent, you eat less of everything. Advent is for waiting. Easter is for singing. Christmas is for huddling close to the fire. The priest is not poor. He has a servant, a fat goose, and shoes without holes. He doesn't till the soil, but he talks about sin with the confidence of someone who's never had to lie for a crust of bread. Still you listen. He buries your dead. He blesses your fields. He might even know your name. When things go wrong, when a child is born sick, or a cow refuses to milk, or the weather turns against you, you look for meaning, for punishment, for sin, for someone to blame. You tie herbs above the door, light a candle, leave a coin at the chapel. You mutter to St. Bridget, or St. Blaise, or St. Jude. You aren't sure which one helps with fever. You try them all. You've heard of people who stopped going to Mass. They vanished, or starved, or had their thatch catch fire in the night. You don't test those stories. Superstition isn't separate from faith. It's just the part the priest doesn't talk about. Your wife hangs charms over the cradle. Your neighbour buries nails at the corner of his field. You carry a bone in your pouch, just in case. The seasons change with the saints. Michaelmas brings the harvest. Candlemas starts the thaw. Midsummer's Eve is a night for fire and fear, when spirits walk and old magic stirs. You've jumped over the fire with bare feet. You've thrown salt into the ashes. You've whispered things you wouldn't dare say aloud. There's a woman outside the village, an herbalist, maybe more. Some say she's a witch. Others say she's just clever. You went to her once when your youngest was sick. She gave you a sack of dried nettles and told you to burn it while singing. You did. The fever broke the next day. Coincidence? God? Her? You'll never know. That's the point. You believe because belief is what keeps you sane. Because it gives shape to fear. Because if you don't believe, what's left? Just cold, just hunger, just death? So you believe. Even when you doubt, you believe. The king prays too, but his prayers are written by others. In the chapel attached to the royal palace, he kneels on cushions, surrounded by marble and stained glass. He holds a prayer book, a psalter illuminated in gold and crimson, with saints drawn in miniature. The words are in Latin, but he has been taught them since childhood. He knows when to bow, when to pause, when to look solemn. His faith is not just personal, it is political. Monarchs in medieval Europe ruled by divine right, their authority sanctioned by God, their power confirmed by coronation and anointing. To doubt the king was to doubt heaven itself. The king has confessors, bishops, and chaplains. He speaks with archbishops about church lands, tithes, theological debates. He funds monasteries and orders mass for the souls of his ancestors. He appoints clerics. He consults with Rome. He does not question doctrine, he shapes it. He observes holy days with ceremony, Easter, Christmas, Corpus Christi. The palace fills with clergy, incense, chant. Meals are altered, penances assigned, gifts offered to shrines. The performance is elaborate and necessary. But the king's religion is not always about belief. It's about structure, about order. The church records births, marriages, deaths. It legitimizes rule. It grants approval. It threatens excommunication. For the king, the church is an institution, a partner and a rival, a mirror of his own power. Still he believes, in his own way. He believes because the system would collapse if he didn't. He believes in divine order, in moral duty, in eternal reward. And yet, he too fears what lives outside the liturgy. He fears omens, eclipses, comets, strange births. He fears prophecy, dreams, the muttering of madmen. He wears relics under his cloak, a saint's tooth, a splinter from the true cross. His armour has a cross etched inside the breastplate. He believes it protects him. He consults astrologers. He reads horoscopes. His advisors tell him which days to travel and which to avoid. Before battle he fasts. He hears mass. He takes communion. He believes it will turn the tide. When plague strikes, he orders public prayers. He funds processions. He closes the city gates. He retreats to the countryside. He commissions masses for the dead. Thousands of names read aloud, night after night. He has seen what faith looks like in desperation. He has seen villagers flog themselves in the street, begging God to spare them. He has seen men weep in front of statues. He has seen the bones of saints carried through mud. He believes, but he does not trust. He rules the body of the realm. The church claims the soul. And both know that if one crumbles, the other soon follows. The peasant clutches a wooden cross and whispers a desperate prayer. The king kisses a jewelled crucifix and signs a royal decree. One lights a candle for luck. The other funds a cathedral. One is told that suffering brings salvation. The other is told that power confirms holiness. Yet both fear the same silence after death. Both kneel in different places, on different floors, wearing different clothes. But both pray to the same God. And both hope they are being heard. You wake before the light. Not from a rooster's crow. He's late, as usual. But from the sound of your joints cracking as you roll upright on a straw mattress that smells of mildew and years of sweat. You rub your eyes. Try to remember if today is your turn to haul water, or your son's, and reach for the same coarse tunic you wore yesterday and the day before. You are not free. That's not something you say out loud. It's not a thought you entertain often. But it lingers in your ribs, in your hands, in the rhythm of your life. You are a serf, bound to the land. Not a slave, not in name, but near enough that the difference hardly matters. Your lord owns the ground beneath your feet. You simply borrow its surface, one furrow at a time. Today's labour is predictable. Muck the stalls, collect firewood, repair a fence flattened in the storm. Tomorrow it might be threshing grain in the manor's barn, or ferrying a barrel of ale to the reeve's house, or helping with the sheep. Work does not rotate with fairness, only with need, and need never sleeps. Each season comes with its own torment. Spring is planting, endless hours hunched over rows of soil, pushing seeds into earth, still clinging to winter's chill. Summer means harvest, and your fingers blister as you reap barley and hay until your tunic clings to you with sweat. Autumn is the rush to preserve, salting meat, storing apples, bottling what little beer you've brewed before it spoils. And winter? Winter is endurance. Cold seeps in through the thatch and into your bones. You wake stiff and hungry, go to sleep hungrier still. Most days you eat bread. Not the white loaves of the rich, but dark, dense barley bread, flecked with grit from the millstone. Pottage if you're lucky, a stew of whatever you've managed to find or grow. Leeks, turnips, beans. A strip of bacon if you're blessed. ale instead of water, because water might kill you. You have no tools of your own, just what's passed down or shared. A wooden plough with a cracked handle, a hoe tied with twine, a cart with one good wheel. If something breaks, you fix it, or you don't and make do anyway. Under feudal law, you owe the lord between 2 and 5 days of labour each week, depending on your agreement. This is called corvée labour, and it's not optional. You work his land before your own. You mend his fences, repair his roads, harvest his grain. Only afterward, if time and daylight allow, do you tend to your own meagre strip of soil. If you protest, you risk punishment. If you falter, you risk starvation. And then there are the taxes. You pay a tithe to the church, 1/10 of everything you grow. If your harvest is bad, the tithe remains the same. The priest doesn't farm, but he eats well. You also owe banalités, or fees for using the Lord's mill, his oven, his press. Nothing is free. Even boiling water might require permission. Your wife labours just as hard. She spins, bakes, cleans, tends animals, nurses children, and still finds time to mend your socks. There's no rest for her either, nor for your children. The moment they can lift a bucket or shoe a goose, they work. No one asks you what you want to be when you grow up. You already are what you will be: a worker of land, a servant of someone else's estate, a man defined by how long his back can hold out. But sometimes there's a quiet joy. You finish digging a new furrow and step back to admire its line. You patch the roof with thatch that stays dry during the next rain. You build a chicken coop from scrap wood and watch your children gather eggs with giddy smiles. It's not ambition. It's not pride. But it's yours. You might think a king's life is idle, that he lies in silk, is fed by servants, drifts from banquet to banquet. That's true, some of the time, but ruling is work. Different work, yes, but work all the same. He wakes surrounded by functionaries, a chamberlain, a squire, a confessor, a groom of the stool. Every movement is observed, every word carries weight. He is expected to be the embodiment of divine order, the cornerstone of a realm stitched together by loyalty and law. His day begins with council. The royal household is a bureaucracy. Treasurers count coin, stewards manage land, scribes track correspondence. The king listens as they list problems: border disputes, unpaid taxes, bad harvests, rebellious barons. He must decide what to do. His decision becomes law. He spends hours holding court, some of it ceremonial, knights seeking titles, nobles pledging fealty. Some of it judicial, cases of land theft, marriage disputes, accusations of treason. His presence alone influences the outcome. One raised eyebrow can sway a sentence. Kings are also diplomats. He arranges marriages like chess moves. One daughter to seal peace with Aragon, a nephew sent to marry a distant duchess. Alliances made not with treaties, but with bloodlines. He governs warfare too. In times of peace he trains, reviews armories, sends funds to fortify castles, approves levy rosters. In times of war, he commands, directly or through trusted generals. Many medieval kings ride to battle themselves. Some die there. His signature controls currency. A decree to mint more silver coins, or to debase the currency slightly, ripples across trade networks. He must think like a banker, a warlord, and a priest, all while keeping the nobles happy and the peasants quiet. Even feasts are work. He sits at the centre, radiant with wealth, a living symbol of stability. His food is inspected, his wine poured by protocol. Every bite is a message. To eat too much is gluttony, too little, ingratitude. He meets with bishops, abbots, and papal legates. The church is both ally and rival. The king may fund monasteries and cathedrals, but he's also wary of Rome's influence. A single excommunication can undermine his throne. Sometimes, in a quiet hour, the king reads, or listens to a clerk read aloud. books of law, chronicles, religious texts. He must be informed. Ignorance is weakness. He must also project health. A weak king invites rebellion. So he rides, he hunts, he leads processions, he is seen. Visibility is a kind of labour, exhausting, unending. Even his sleep is guarded, his dreams not fully his own. He doesn't dig ditches, but he holds a realm together. And that's no small task. The peasants' hands are calloused from earth. The kings are calloused from decisions. One sweats in the fields, the other sweats in the throne room. One's misstep means hunger, the other's misstep means rebellion. Both are watched. One by the steward, the other by his subjects. Both are punished. One by weather, the other by politics. The peasant works to endure. The king works to be remembered. But neither truly rests. And neither can exist without the other. You feel it before anyone else does. The way your breath shortens. The way your hands shake a little when you lift the pail. You try not to let the others see. There's too much to do. The firewood's low. The roof leaks again. There's turnip rot in the cellar. You sit more often, tell your children to fetch this or that. You smile when they obey, though inside you hate needing help. You were strong once. You worked from sunrise to nightfall. You built things with your hands. You never thought about how many winters were left until now. The pain gets worse. There is no doctor. There's no diagnosis. You do not know if it's your lungs or your liver or just your body deciding it's had enough. The midwife comes and gives you a tonic made of bitter root. The healer suggests nettle broth. The priest visits with a candle and a book. He asks if you are ready to confess. You are. Not because you think you've sinned more than anyone else, but because that's what you do. You confess. You receive the last rites. You try to die with dignity, even if the straw beneath you is wet and your wife is weeping into her sleeves. In medieval villages, death is part of life. The average life expectancy hovers around 35, but it isn't because people drop dead in their 30s. It's because children die often, and women die in childbirth, and accidents and illness don't wait. If you survive past childhood, you might live to 40, maybe even 50, but it's rare to see 60. Your family gathers. They're quiet. They don't ask questions. They know. You try to say something meaningful. A lesson. A joke. A goodbye. You try to remember your father's face. You try not to think of your dead son. You think about the fence you never fixed, and the new tools you can't afford, and the wheat you planted that someone else will harvest. There is no funeral procession. There's no tombstone. You're buried behind the church, maybe with a wooden cross, if there's time to carve one. The priest says words in Latin. You don't understand them. You hope God does. And what's left of you? A patched roof, a good rake, a son who knows how to tie a proper bundle of kindling, a daughter who still sings while she milks the goat. Maybe someone will name their baby after you. Maybe they'll say, he was kind, he worked hard, he never wasted bread. That is enough, because no one remembers most peasants. Not in books, not in songs, but the world they built, one rock and one bale of hay at a time. That stays standing. That's legacy. He feels it too, but he's not allowed to show it. A king dying is a dangerous thing. It unsettles the court. It invites ambition. So the royal physicians say he is only tired. The courtiers whisper that he is resting. His enemies wonder how long he has left. His body is failing, but protocol does not. In medieval Europe, royal death is a ritualized event. The king does not simply fade, he begins the transition. His bedchamber becomes a chamber of state. Attendants hover. Clerics arrive. The royal confessor is summoned. The windows are shuttered. The best relics are brought in. He is anointed again, just as he was at coronation. but this time with the oil of the dying. He confesses sins. He asks for forgiveness. He clutches a crucifix of gold and mutters prayers learned in boyhood. A scribe stands nearby to write down his last words, or at least something poetic enough to be remembered. The king's death must not be ordinary. If he ruled wisely, he is mourned. If he ruled poorly, he is endured until the last breath. But in either case, he is treated like a vessel of divinity until the end. His family gathers. Sons, if he has them. A wife, maybe two. A bishop reads scripture. Trumpets may sound in the courtyard. The realm holds its breath. And when he dies, really dies, the news is announced with fanfare. A black cloth is hung from the castle walls. Church bells toll across the countryside. Messengers ride to the cities. Nobles are summoned to court. The royal seal is broken. Then comes the body. His corpse is washed and dressed. Sometimes embalmed, sometimes not. Some kings have their organs removed. Some have their hearts buried separately. Some have their bones boiled to be transported without rot. He is placed in a coffin of wood, or stone, or even lead. A likeness may be carved in wax. A death mask taken. The funeral is pageantry. Dozens of priests. Hundreds of candles. Choirs singing psalms. Nobles in black. A procession of mourners. Some paid to weep. Some there to be seen. The coffin is carried on a cart draped in velvet. Horses wear black. The heralds cry out his name, title by title, as he is lowered into the tomb. He is interred in a royal crypt, Westminster, Saint Denis, spire, surrounded by ancestors, sealed in stone. His tomb is engraved with Latin verse, his image carved in marble. His sword may lie beside him. A crown may be placed at his feet. Sometimes he's buried with coins, relics, even jewels. His will is read. His heirs named, succession confirmed. But the kingdom does not rest. Wars break out over inheritance. Bastards rise to claim legitimacy. Queens remarry. Parliaments quarrel. One king dies. Another takes his place, always. And what remains of him? A law that bears his name. A cathedral funded by his tithe. A portrait in a dusty hall. Maybe a chapter in a chronicle, penned by a monk who never met him. But more often, his memory fades, overwritten by the next war, the next tax, the next king. The peasant lies beneath earth and stone. The king lies beneath gold and marble. One is buried by neighbours, the other by nobles. One rests beside a ditch, the other in a crypt, but they are equally still. Time forgets them at the same speed. The world turns without them. Grass grows over the grave. Language shifts, stories blur. In the end, legacy isn't a statue or a monument. It's the echo of your labour. The bread you baked that fed a child. The wall you built that stood another winter. The law you passed that outlasted your bones. The song someone still hums without remembering where they learned it. All things fade. But some things endure. In work, in memory, in silence. And when both the king and the peasant have crumbled to dust, the only difference is how long it takes the wind to blow their names away.